for-profit, non-game fish hatchery. The only one, I guess, on the planet, as far as we know. A lot of the states and federal hatcheries work with non-game species. Nobody's done it with as many species or as much geographical distribution as conservation fisheries. We've worked with over 80 non-game freshwater fish in North America. And our goal is to conserve biodiversity. So this is a photo behind you of Joel Sartori. He's got a project called the Photo Arc. He's gone around the world photographing fish to document how much biodiversity is out there and what we need to do to protect it. He's photographed over 100 species of fish in our facility alone. Most of those are derricks. I don't know how many of you know Derek Wheaton. He's with Aquarium Society. He's the reason y'all are here, which is great. We love having folks who are interested in fish and what we do come and see our facility. But we've been in this spot for 20 years. We've been a business for almost 40. And we've been working with endangered species mainly to try to protect them and restore them across the whole eastern United States, from Oklahoma to Pennsylvania, Texas, Florida. We've got fish from Oklahoma right now. And the video right there, if you've never heard of Hidden Rivers, look it up online. There's a group, that's J.R. Shute, one of our founders. They have a video called Hidden Rivers, Freshwaters Illustrated, and they came to Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia for a decade and shot footage to put in this film, just to document the amazing things that are going on in here. And there's Pat Rakes, our other, this is working out perfectly. Pat Rakes, our other founder. So Pat and JR started conservation fisheries when they were grad students at UT back in the 1980s, and I'm blessed to have the opportunity to keep it going. So it's a fun place to work, amazing work that we do to preserve biodiversity. So let's go look at fish and tanks and stuff.
Sounds good. Lead the way. Everybody have their pocket line with plastic bags? They all have their own bags, their pockets line with plastic bags. Put all the fishes in there, come on in.
So this is where the magic happens. This is our main hatchery floor. Right now, CFI is working with about 14 species of fish. And most of those are threatened or endangered, and we're trying to not only preserve them, but put them back in places where they belong out in the wild. But we started with one tank and one project in graduate school at University of Tennessee. JR and Pat got $3,000 to work with the yellowfin madtom, the smoky madtom. We'll see yellowfin madtom today. We're still working with it 40 years later. But since then we've grown. We've got 9 full-time employees. Right now we've got 4 volunteers. So this building is pretty packed when everybody's going in the middle of the week. 14 species. Each one of our lead biologists, we've got 7 conservation biologists, has 2 species that they're in charge of. And it takes a lot of work to raise rare fish. I mean, all of you probably dabbled with raising fish at home. Some of them are impossible. We just can't figure out how to make them spawn, how to get them to reproduce. But CFI's been really successful in that. Derek is a great example of that. We have a hobby system, we call it the hobby system over here. Derek brings in 20 fish. In addition to the 14 we're officially working with, he probably has 14 over there on his rack that he's dabbling with, figuring out how to spawn these fish in the wild. But the work we do is not that common. Most game fishes that people work with are trout, bass, walleye, things that are easy to spawn. Big bodied fish, easy to reproduce. We're working with minnows and darters and miniature catfish and the madtoms that have really specific reproductive modes, and they're really hard to reproduce in the wild, or in the hatchery. In the wild, they're in trouble because of impacts to the environment. So CFI comes in kind of at the end of the impacts. So if Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, TWRAs, fixed problems and gotten the river back into good condition, we can come in and put fish back. We're sort of that last step. The other thing we do is kind of a last gasp. right behind you on this rack, these three systems behind you are all the Barron's top minnow populations that we hold. Barron's top minnow lives where the Duck and the Elk River come together on the Barron's Plateau in Middle Tennessee. They're kind of under a triple threat. There are a lot of groundwater withdrawals for nursery. They're huge industrial nurseries out there, and they just suck water out of the ground all the time. Drought. We've had some unprecedented droughts in the last few years, and competition from another fish. Western mosquito fish, Gambusia affinis, was introduced all over the southeast. They're great where they belong. They're a North American native. Don't have any problem with them as a fish. But when you introduce them into the wrong environment, they outcompete the natives. They eat the young, they eat the larvae, they disturb breeding. So these fish, the Barron's top minnows, have those three strikes against them. And in our hatchery, and drought is particularly big one. The type locality, the place where they were originally described, and the kind of stronghold for the fish, dried up last year. And we had to go in and harvest as many fish as we could and keep them here so we can put them back when the water comes back up. That's the fourth time in 20 years that spring is dried up. So CFI doesn't like to be that last gasp effort on things. We would rather put things back, expand the range of fish, but occasionally we're working with fish where we're holding the last fish on the planet, maybe. That's a huge responsibility for what we do. Let's see, Derek went that way, which is good. I'll go this way, and we can talk about food. We grow the whole food chain here at CFI, so it's important. How many people have we got? We can get everybody in this room. Come on in here. So this is our food production room, and in here we grow at least half of the food that all these fish eat, because live foods are absolutely critical to a lot of these species. That's Audrey. Audrey is biological control. We have a hanging pitcher plant over here. We get gnats in the building, and Audrey and her pitchers are really great at catching gnats. So we're using a little bit of biology for biological control in here. But in this room, we grow everything from brackish water rotifers, which are the smallest foods that we produce, to Daphnia, to Cereodaphnia. We've got Daphnia magna over here that are one of the biggest live foods that we grow. So you can see each one of these cultures is just teeming with fish. So we'll harvest each one of these rows once a week and feed out to the fish that we have in the main hatchery. But our ability to grow live foods has really been instrumental to our success in raising some of these rare fish. Our latest experiment is shrimp. So this row of tanks, and I think the one below it, has cherry shrimp. You can buy them in the aquarium trade. But a lot of the darters and catfish that we produce here at the hatchery eat aquatic insects. That's their main food source out in the wild. So we tried to figure out, we can't grow aquatic insects, it's impossible. What's the nearest analog that can provide the same kind of nutrition, the same kind of prey item to what they're eating in the wild? We decided on shrimp. So we've been using those.
Wow, my cherry shrimp disappeared.
Yeah, cherry shrimp disappear when you put them in tank with your other fish. They're going to get eaten. But we've also got microworms, vinegar eels, white worms, earthworms. We grow earthworms. Some of our catfish love big fat earthworm to feed on.
Blackworms?
Blackworms, yeah, we buy blackworms, which is, we're trying to set up our own culture system. If any of you have tried to buy blackworms in the last 2 years, really, the supply is
6 months.
gone. Yeah, real bad the last 6 months. It's sort of stepping back up. They're selling a little bit more. But there's one operation in California that provides blackworms for the entire country, and we're all hostage to that operation. So we're trying to set up our own blackworm rearing facility in the back so we can have that really good food. I mean, blackworms, we think, are key to some of our fish spawning. If we can feed them over the winter when they're getting into condition, a lot of blackworms, a lot of these shrimp, then they really put on weight. The females have really good, solid clutches of eggs, and we have good success with them. But this room is the basis I believe, for CFI's success. We grow the foods that these fish are really needing to survive and get into good spawning position. And we recently expanded it. There's a little hallway that we kind of bypassed when we came in. We had maybe 4 racks of these tanks, and they were all these small ones, little Tupperware containers with a tap on them. We've moved to 10-gallon tanks, which is 3 times the volume, so we can raise 3 times the amount of food in this room, and we have more rack space. So we think next year we're really going to have a good spawning year because we're able to feed the fish what they need. So it starts with the bottom of the food chain. And ask questions, interrupt me. If you see something you don't understand, I will tell Derek to come back and explain it. This is not my room. But it's really cool stuff that's going on in here. This room's warm, you'll notice when we get back in. We keep this room around 76 to 78 because the food grows better in here at that temperature. The main hatchery room, we try to follow what's going on in the streams. So in the winter it'll be 45, and my people hate it because it's really cold. And in the winter it'll get up to 78 or 80 because that's what the stream's temperatures are out in the wild, and my people hate it. So there's a sweet spot, spring and fall, that's really good to work on.
One thing I wanted to add, you might have said it, and I just didn't hear it.
So we're going to do the tour, and you're going to show us around. But once we're done, we get to explore a little bit on our own too, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
so you'll have more time to come in here and look, so we can keep the tour kind of going.
Feel free to walk. The one thing that I'll ask of everybody, and biocontrol is important to us, so please don't put your hands in a tank. And if you do, I know it's almost irresistible, please don't put your hands in another tank because we don't want to spread disease. We don't want to spread our cultures. We've got Daphnia over on the other side right here. Some of them have been invaded by Daphnia, and the Daphnia are out competing with Daphnia, and our cultures are kind of crashing because of it. So just be cautious about what you touch and what you touch after you touch something, so that we don't.
What you do is you tell people that in the dark tanks might be a piranha.
That's a good thought. I will show you Bruce. He's pretty vicious. He's our pet green sunfish. Bruce came in when we rescued the Barron stop minnows from their tide lookout. I said we went out and get them when there's a drought and it's drying up. We accidentally brought Bruce in about 6 years ago, and he became a mascot. So we got a big green sunfish. That's not important from a conservation standpoint, but we like him.
Everybody's got to have a pet.
Yeah.
All right, we'll swing out this way.
Yum.
Most of the things that we did so a lot of our systems are
Him lately.
come together. So this is what I'm doing over here. I'm trying to redo all the plumbing in the building. So we plumb between 21 and 30 tanks into one single layer. Well, so each one of these racks is a separate system. Come and walk this way a little bit. And in between the systems, we'll have barriers. So we don't want fish jumping across. We don't want water splashing across and contaminating this next system. So we'll put a barrier in between, like plastic or something like that. So each one of these systems usually has a different species or a different population in it, and we work to isolate them from each other. These are the Barron's top minnow systems, and there's a school of them right there who are behaving really uncharacteristically. They must be hungry. They usually hide up in those mops, but they want to feed right now. So the males are the ones with the really nice fin margins, red spots on a blue background. There's a female right there. But these are just gorgeous little top minnows. And they spawn in aquatic vegetation in the wild. So we provide these yarn mops as a surrogate spawning habitat for them. A Girl Scout troop from Fountain City came to us interested in working with us and said, what's a project we can do? We said, well, you can do kind of an arts and crafts things and build us some spawning mops. We expected 20 or 30. They give us 300 mops. They just went nuts on it. So the spawning mops that you see in our tanks right now, and a huge pile that are over in the corner, were done by a Girl Scout troop about 20 years ago. And we're still using those, so it's really awesome. But these fish are really critically imperiled out in the wild. Like I said, their habitat's under attack from water withdrawals from drought. The mosquito fish are competing with them or out-competing them. And we have 3 populations of fish in here, 2 of which don't occur out in the wild anymore. Where they were has been eliminated. So we hope to put them back someday. But this is the situation we don't want to find ourselves in. We want to be advancing fish populations, not preserving them like this. These guys are fun. And if folks want to come closer, you can lift up the shades here. These are pygmy sculpins. Come on, and everybody come this way. We've got a few step stools if you want to get out higher. But look right down on the bottom. There are usually a fair number of fish right up in front. Look in the second row too. If it says N equals 0 on those labels, there's nobody in there. Here's a male. But these guys are a really cool fish. They're only known from one spring in North Alabama, in Anniston. The only population on the entire planet outside of our hatchery is in Anniston, Alabama. And there's an Army base that's about 5 miles from that spring head. It was a chemical weapons testing facility. So there's this terrible groundwater plume headed toward the spring where these fish live. So we're raising young to be tested against the chemicals that are in the groundwater plume. So we're going to use the little young that we produce here. There's a bunch of them in trays. Go ahead and pull that back. Yeah. So all of these are fried. And I'll get the... So if you want to come by. So we're trying to force them to spawn. So they usually spawn based on day length. And we are artificially influencing their timing to try to force them to spawn. So they're actually behind the black plastic because we're extending, if we extend it 72 hours instead of a normal 8 to 10 hour life cycle, it triggers them to spawn. So we've learned a few tricks about getting them to spawn when they don't want to. I can mention the lights above. See all the Christmas lights? Those are dusk and dawn. We have all the lights in the building are on an astronomical timer that match the day length at this latitude. So short days in the winter, long days in the summer, these come on half an hour earlier to provide dusk and dawn, because a lot of our fish feed only at dusk and dawn. The mad tom catfishes, as soon as the main lights turn out and these come on, they're running around the tanks looking for food. So we're trying to match the conditions that they see out in the stream. From the substrate that they're on, the gravel or sand, to the day length and the temperature. We're trying to match what's going on out in the streams they live in. But these guys will unfortunately be kind of sacrificed in the name of science. We don't want to pull a bunch of rare fish out of the environment and test them to see if we can kill them with these groundwater contaminants. So CFI raises a lot of babies to be used in that testing, and we don't affect the main population that's out there in the streams. So that's one of the odd ways that we contribute to conservation. But we really like these fish. They're just amazing. Look at them as you come by. Lift up the black plastic. That's not a problem at all. think about it, that's where all the food is, at the surface. Some of these fish feed on pollen, they're feeding on algae that's growing at the top, all the microinvertebrates growing at the top, whatever hits the water, they go for it, yeah. And we take advantage of that to collect them. So we have drains at the back of the tanks, and at the top, it kind of skims the water off the top of the tank. And we use that to passively collect them. It's not hooked up right now, but they'll come down into these white tubs where we can collect the larvae.
Oh, absolutely.
And then we'll take a turkey baster, which is the greatest tool for conservation fish ever, suck one up and put them into these rearing tubs. And then once they're in the rearing tub, we can concentrate the food. See this flow coming in right here? That's an automatic feeding reservoir. I'll show you the back of the system in a second. We've got solenoids on timers that will actually open up a reservoir of food, feed out 30 seconds of food every 10 minutes to these fish. So we feed them 24 hours a day using those reservoirs.
So it just goes down.
So yeah, there's a reservoir on each one of those. But these guys are finally settling down to the bottom and behaving like darters.
Oh, I see. There you go.
When they're little, do they swim?
When they're little, they swim around up at the surface. So we have some younger ones over here, and they're still up in the water column.
At what age do they go to the bottom?
Some of these will swim for almost a month, 28 days to 30 days.
I notice you guys have a lot of snails and everything.
That's our cleanup crew. Yeah. So if you guys will kind of step down to that next row, I'll get this next group of folks.
You know, spawning techniques and things. And also because up until a couple months ago, I didn't have a real fish room. So I leveraged some of our empty space and found a place to put some more of my fish.
So did you say these tanks are your, like your hobby tank?
Yeah, we call this the hobby system, but they're all my fish, so it's my hobby.
Or a hobby system, not Well, you're breeding out some native species and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I only recently, since joining the group, like the club, have gotten back into tropical fish. So for 10 to 15 years, I was only keeping United States native fish species. So most of these are things that I've collected and then spawned or whatever. So
How did you come into this? Like, what do you do in school? Is this a biology degree or what?
yeah, I have a biology degree. I always joke that my dad's a retired dentist, so of course we had aquariums all over the house and everything. So like that's how I got into fish originally. It's like we had a 29-gallon with a bunch of tropical fish, and my dad had a tank at the office, and I used to help him do water changes and stuff.
That's awesome. I think that's the first biologist I was like, my dad was a dentist, so we always had a fish tank around.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Just like Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I grew up in California, and when I moved to the East Coast, like I was always a nature nerd, so I was like reading all these field guides, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of really cool native fish out here that I can go look at. And then I started, taking a seine and just poking around in creeks and discovering all the cool diversity and everything. And then I was also into fishing as a teenager, and one time I caught a little bluegill, and I was like, what happens if I put it in an aquarium? So I did, and then I was like, all the native species are really just as cool as all the tropical species.
I guess what do you find is the biggest difference between keeping things that are commonly like for sale at stores versus what we find in our waters? Is it the food?
Some of it's the food, but like all of the minnows really will eat flake food 5 minutes after you get them home if you collect them out of the creek. So
right.
Mostly temperature. Most of them don't like to get above 70, 75 degrees.
It can be hard to keep them cool enough. I think.
Yeah. It's been interesting since I've gotten back into tropical fish this last year. I've been buying aquarium heaters because for years, I gave all my aquarium heaters to people because I didn't want them.
Right.
And it's interesting in Tennessee because Tennessee doesn't really allow people to collect native species. Like the bait laws are really weird here. So most of the things that I keep now are from like these shiners are from Alabama because I can buy an Alabama fishing license, go on a road trip, and go poke around their creeks and legally bring fish back. But you can't really do that in Tennessee.
I talked to Rob a little bit about that while I was there because I wondered, like, how you get native species legally here. Because I get there are certain circumstances, like the work you guys do here, where you can go collect and stuff, right?
And I guess I think Rob said that if you have a receipt and you like purchase them legally from someone out of state, you can keep them. But like,
Yeah.
there's kind of some weird legal gray areas and stuff. So
Just need to prove it if somebody asks,
yeah,
I guess.
so I've been keeping a lot of fish from out of state and going to Florida and collecting killifish down there and stuff. So.
Neat. But what's a great place to go collecting killifish in Florida?
Anywhere. Roadside ditches.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Basically, and pygmy sunfish down there too. Like, basically anywhere that you find where you see aquatic type vegetation growing up.
Yeah.
If you get out there with a dip net, even if there's 2 inches of water, you'll get some cool stuff out of there. Like,
Very cool.
Florida's cool because there's water everywhere. And
Yeah.
There's fish in most of that water.
They find their way through it.
Yeah.
What are these amazing fish on the other side?
The rainbow shiners?
Yeah. These are probably the most glorious fish I've ever seen. What can you tell me about them?
So, rainbow shiners are native to Alabama, a tiny little bit of Tennessee and Georgia. They kind of occur in sort of a slant along the Gulf Coast a little bit. So they're just a native minnow that happens to look really spectacular.
Is there like an evolution reason for that coloring? Is it so that you see each other or to deceive predators? What could it be?
They normally live in really clear water, so it's not any struggle for them to find each other. I think it may have to do with like they're another species that they spawn on chub mounds in the wild. And there's like a weird thing where the chubs are combative with each other, but like brightly colored minnows, they don't seem to register as like any kind of threat or anything. The chubs have, across their range in most of the eastern U.S., chubs have different minnow species that'll spawn on them. So rainbow shiners is just one. Up here in the Smokies, we have one called a saffron shiner that just turns bright, like blood red, like really spectacular. And they all kind of spawn together just kind of in a group like in the springtime. So it may be that they just are bright so that the chub doesn't view them as a threat and doesn't chase them off. Or sometimes it's just, one of them mutated and the girls liked it. Maybe it's a sexual selection thing.
They're just that extra.
Yeah.
Extra over
Yeah.
the course of thousands of years, and you get beautiful fish.
Yeah, people don't think about native fish being really colorful. People don't think about freshwater fish being really colorful, but these guys are just something that I don't know what can compare to that.
Yeah, I mean, for freshwater especially.
Yeah.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah.
go, folks. A little inside look at conservation fisheries. This is a resource here in Knoxville that I guess I've known about it for a really long time. I went to something called Catfish Con up in Virginia. It's run by a lot of the people that did the big fish deal, and that's where I actually heard about this. Was at one of the little meetings talking about Mad Toms or something like that. They're talking about this place, and it's been around for a really long time, and I hope it just continues to be around for a while. I'm going to put a link down below if you'd like to contribute or want to know more information. I bought a cool t-shirt. If you'd like to do any of that, there'll be a link down below where you can check it out. But until next time, follow your bliss, support your local conservation fisheries, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.